You know that feeling, right? You're in a conversation with someone you know really well, your partner, a close friend, maybe a teammate at work, and all of a sudden things just feel heavy. The easy back and forth you used to have is gone. Now everything feels like an effort, and you just can't figure out why. Well, it turns out the answer is usually way simpler and, well, more mechanical than we think.
So, what's really going on here? Why does that easy flow in our most important relationships sometimes just disappear? Our minds immediately jump to the worst conclusions, don't they? We think, oh no, is there some hidden conflict? Is something wrong between us? But what if the problem isn't about feelings at all? What if it's actually about physics? And this right here, this is a total game changer. The way we feel in those moments, it often has absolutely nothing to do with hurt feelings or some big emotional drama. The problem is structural. The actual foundation of the way you're interacting has shifted, and usually it's happened so quietly that nobody's even noticed.
Okay, so this brings us to the source of the problem, this unseen weight. And it's important to know this isn't something that shows up after one big explosive argument. No, it accumulates silently, little by little, through a process of quiet, unnoticed drift. I mean, think about it. Our relationships aren't really built on just a few big moments. They're built on thousands of repeating patterns, or what we can call interaction loops. One person shares something, the other person responds, and the next thing you say adjusts based on that response. When these little loops land cleanly, over and over again, things just feel easy. But when they start to miss, that's when the strain builds up. To really get a handle on this, let's use a really powerful metaphor. I want you to imagine something called an interaction surface. See, this interaction loop we were just talking about, it's like the engine that creates this surface. Every single cycle, every little exchange is either keeping the ground smooth and even, or it's creating a tiny little bump. And it's this constant, repeating process that totally defines the feel of the entire relationship. And this comparison just lays it out perfectly. When you're on an even surface, everything flows. It's light. Small signals like a quick text totally work. You don't have to explain every little thing. But on an uneven surface, it's the complete opposite. Every interaction feels heavy. You find yourself constantly saying, wait, what did you mean by that? And even the simplest signals start to invite all this guessing. So, the big question is, how does a perfectly smooth, even surface get so bumpy and uneven? Well, it happens through a process we call the quiet drift. And this is absolutely crucial. Drift is not one big event. It's a whole series of tiny, seemingly harmless little mismatches. A rushed response over here, a weird pause over there. On their own, each one seems totally reasonable. But when you add them all up, they slowly warp the entire rhythm of your communication, creating all those bumps on the surface. And this drift tends to happen in stages. First, you hit early drift. You just kind of notice things are taking a little more effort than they used to. Then it can progress to active drift. This is when clarifying becomes a regular part of your conversations. And finally, you can hit significant drift, and that's when that original feeling of ease is just gone. And the longer this goes on, the more expensive it gets to fix it. And I don't mean money, I mean emotional energy and effort. Making a small adjustment during that early drift stage, super simple. But by the time you're in significant drift, trying to resolve even a basic misunderstanding can feel like this huge, exhausting task. So this brings us right to the heart of our explainer. Why do those small signals we all rely on, the thumbs up emoji, the one-word reply, the K, suddenly stop working and actually start causing problems? This quote just nails it. Small signals are shortcuts, right? And shortcuts only work when both people are already on the same page, starting from the same place. They rely on that foundation of shared understanding, that smooth, even surface. They can't create it out of thin air. When that surface is even, small signals are amazing. They're so efficient. A simple got it just acknowledges you received the message. A yep closes out a loop that was already finished. They feel totally invisible and light because they're just leaning on the understanding that's already there. But when that surface gets all uneven from drift, we start asking these same little signals to do these big, heavy jobs. We suddenly need a one-word text to carry a ton of reassurance. We need a period at the end of a sentence to signal some complex, indirect meaning.
And that's exactly where they fail, because they just weren't designed to carry that kind of weight.
And this is the real difference, isn't it? Moves that reduce effort, they just confirm what's already known. That's why they feel so light and invisible. But moves that invite guessing, well, they try to compress a really complex idea into a tiny signal before any clarity is even there. And that's when our communication starts to feel so loaded and ambiguous. Okay, so what if you're listening to this and thinking, yep, that's me. My interaction surface is definitely uneven. How do you fix it? How do you repave it and get back to smooth ground? The good news is there's a really clear protocol for this. But first, we need a really crucial mindset shift. Having to use more words to be more explicit with someone you're close to, that is not a failure. It is not backtracking. Think of it as maintenance. It's how you restore that shared map you both use so that all those easy, simple shortcuts can start working again later. And here it is, the simple, 4-step, fail-safe protocol. Step 1. Just stop using the small signals that are causing all the confusion, just for a bit. Step 2. Go back to using clearer or more complete sentences. Spell things out. Step 3. Really focus on reestablishing that shared understanding, making sure you're both on the same page. And finally, step 4. Only when it starts to feel natural again, let the shortcuts and the simple language come back on their own. And look, if you take just one thing away from all of this, let it be this right here. Small signals, all those little shortcuts we love, they're a luxury. They're totally optional. But clarity is the foundation of everything. It's absolutely non-negotiable if you want a healthy, easy interaction.
You know, this framework applies literally everywhere, with your partner, your team at work, maybe even in the conversation you have with yourself. Just acknowledging that the heaviness you feel is structural and not some kind of personal failing is what gives you the power to actually fix it. So take a second and think about your own relationships. Which interaction surface will you flatten first?